Welcome in, everybody. Little Sunday morning edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. So bottom line, I think this is how we're going to operate going forward. Obviously, starting next Sunday, we're going to have NFL football. And so bottom line, we're just going to go live early Sunday morning, react to the college football slate. Then I'll let all of us enjoy some NFL football. But I'll tell you what, we do have a lot to react to. We did a couple reaction shows on Saturday, but man, oh man, what a week one. And we are here to discuss it all. What are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk Alabama. I had a night to sleep on it. I actually feel worse about Alabama maybe today than I did yesterday. Kalen DeBoer, not only is he the right guy, but just where are they as a program right now? I think it's officially time to panic if you're a Tide fan. Texas, listen, another one. I slept on it a little bit. I blamed a lot on Arch Manning yesterday. How much of this falls on Steve Sarkisian? We'll discuss that. We'll go ahead and talk about LSU's big win. We did not talk about it yesterday. You talk about things all-time wrong takes by Torres. Did not see that coming from Brian Kelly's crew. And finally, we will wrap a couple other stories, including who stayed up late to watch Nico Iamaleava. He looked a lot like the quarterback from Tennessee last year, only with a lot less talent around him. So we're going to discuss all of that. Before we get started, a couple quick reminders. One, make sure you're subscribed. Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. New clips, new videos going up every single day. Chat is already humming. We really do appreciate your support joining us here on a Sunday morning. Drop your comments, drop your thoughts. By the way, you want to do me a favor, my Fox Sports Radio show. Download that podcast. Really would appreciate your support there. If we get a couple hundred extra downloads on top of what we already do, really would appreciate your support. You know who else's support I appreciate? Our friends, our partners. I'm talking about Circa Casino and Circa Sportsbook. Okay, so I've told you all about Circa, but the bottom line is, listen, in Las Vegas, this is the number one sports book. If you are a diehard, if you are a junkie, if you love throwing a couple bucks down on a game, there is no better experience, no better atmosphere. This is, by the way, the world's largest sports book. Make sure to check it out if you're in Las Vegas. But here is the cool thing. They have just opened up a replica sports book, Mint, Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Kentucky. And if you are in Kentucky, if you're on that Kentucky-Tennessee border, Ohio, Indiana, you got to go check this out, okay? Beautiful new facility, the VSiN Studios. They're producing shows live from there. So make sure to go check it out. Again, this is the place to go. Listen, we're in a world now, you got to spend thousands of dollars to watch all these games. You need YouTube TV, you need apps, you need Peacock, you need this, you need that. You don't need all that if you could just get to the sportsbook. So go to Circa Sportsbook if you're in Las Vegas. Also, by the way, if you are on that Kentucky-Tennessee border, go ahead, check them out in Franklin, Kentucky. Really do appreciate everybody's support. By the way, the Survivors are still open, so you can sign up for Circa Survivor right there. I won't do it. I just wash my hair. But Circa Survivor and, of course, Circa Millions, you can sign up in Nevada. Sign up for a proxy service. They will obviously take care of all of your picks throughout the year. All right, with that said, it has been a busy couple days. There is no more time to waste, so let's go ahead and get to the topic of the day. Topic of the day, listen, obviously, look, we could start in Columbus, Ohio. That game is almost 24 hours old at this point. So instead, let's go ahead and focus a little bit on the game that certainly caught everyone's attention Saturday afternoon. We all tuned in to Texas, Ohio State to see what that was about. Then you figured, okay, Alabama's at Florida State. Alabama coming off a disappointing year. Alabama's going to go ahead and get the win. Not so much. 31-17 is the final score. And I'll say a couple things. One, listen, I got a lot wrong this weekend, but one thing I did say, I did think Florida State could keep things close in this game. I did think Florida State, Gus Malzahn, that offense, there's just enough misdirection. They'll be able to figure out a way to move the ball and keep Alabama on their toes. But I'll tell you this, you look at that game, okay? And I think the thing that stood out is keep Alabama on their toes may have been the understatement of the century as Florida State finishes the game 388 yards of total offense, 236 yards rushing, 5 yards per carry. And I'll just say this game felt very much like an extension of last year for Kalen DeBoer and the Crimson Tide. I think it's totally fair as Kalen DeBoer falls to 9-5 with 4 losses to unranked teams to question Kalen DeBoer. And I'll say this, it's going to sound terrible. I didn't even like some of the verbiage and wording coming out of this after the game from the players that were on the field. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. We did talk about it a little bit yesterday, but I think there's some new layers now that I've thought about it. But what I keep going back to is Alabama. They opened the game. They spent all offseason planning for this moment, and it looked exactly what you would want it to look like if you're an Alabama fan. 17 plays, 12 rushes. You run the ball right at Florida State. You score a touchdown, you go up 7-0. Florida State comes back and scores, and you sit there and say, listen, it's not the end of the world. It is what it is. Florida State had had a nice run, but listen, just stick to the game plan, stick to who we are, stick to what we do. What do they end up doing? They have a 9-play drive, multiple penalties, 2 rush attempts on that drive. That was the drive where they attempted the 53-yard field goal. It falls way short. And to me, that entire drive was a metaphor for the entire game. Why is that? One, you completely abandoned the run, okay? And again, we're going to get into the Florida State perspective. Gus Malzahn deserves credit, but at the same time, it worked in the first drive. You ran the ball right down their throats, and you immediately went away from it. Now, I'll say this. I don't – listen, I follow the NFL, okay? I didn't realize that this was Ryan Grubb's reputation with the Seattle Seahawks, right? And so – but people said, like, this was what Ryan Grubb did with the Seahawks last year. This is who he was. This is what he was about. But to me, that was a metaphor for the entire game. 12 rush attempts on the first drive. They had 17 rush attempts the rest of the game, and it's not like they were down double figures. Listen, you're down – 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. I get you got to throw the ball. But in the first quarter, it's a 7-7 game, and you just decide that you got to make Ty Simpson into Peyton Manning, and he's got to drop back on every single pass. I don't get it. So you have that. Then I thought the 53-yard field goal was a perfect metaphor for what this team has been under Kalen DeBoer. Confused, unorganized, bad decisions, worst possible time. You look at the decision that they made to kick that field goal. Listen, it was early. You could have punted. You could have gone for it inside Florida State territory. There were a lot of options. But kicking the 53-yard field goal when you don't trust your kicker, probably not the answer. And oh, by the way, after that, I thought it determined a lot of what you did afterwards going forward, right? Because then all of a sudden you're going for it on 4th down when you shouldn't because you don't trust your kicker. You don't trust your kicker because you had him take a kick that he's not capable of making, okay? And so this is a bigger metaphor. Alabama loses. We're going to get back to DeBoer in a second. But I'll tell you this, I think the most disappointing thing to me, if I was an Alabama fan, is pretty straightforward. It was the comments after the game from the players. Now, I understand there's nothing to say. There's no perfect comment in a moment like this. But did you see what the players said after the game? Ty Simpson said, quote, here it is. Let me find the quote from Ty Simpson. He said, I promise you one thing, and it goes to every Alabama fan and my teammates. I'm going to work hard, and we're going to get this fixed. But he also called Alabama complacent after taking a 7-0 lead. And to me, I think what would be frustrating to me if I was an Alabama fan, you know what this sounds like? You know why I would be so angry if I was an Alabama fan at these quotes, that we were complacent, that we're going to get it figured out. This sounds like the exact same quotes that these players had after Alabama lost games last year. Go back and read some of the quotes. We took them lightly. We took them for granted. This was after the Vanderbilt game. We didn't take them seriously enough. We're going to get better. We're going to figure it out. By the way, then the season goes on. They lose to Tennessee. It's not over. We're getting complacent. Blah, 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 blah. If you remember, C.J. Dupree was a tight end on last year's team. He said, guys are getting complacent. They're showing up late to meetings. Well, didn't you have a whole offseason to figure it out? And I think to me, that's the frustrating part. And listen, I will admit, I was one of those guys. that said, like, listen, this Alabama team's going to be different. Ryan Grubb's coming in, and also things are going to be different this year. Last year, not everybody was rowing in the same direction. Some guys were still loyal to Saban. They weren't totally bought in on the DeBoer experience, blah, 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 this and that. I was one of those guys. That said that, and shame on me. Because at the end of the day, I think that's what the most frustrating part is. This was supposed to be different, yet this looked exactly the same as it did a year ago. And as I sit there and think about Alabama right now under Kalen DeBoer, I think there are a few things that stand out to me. One, who is Alabama under Kalen DeBoer right now, right? And to me, I think what the frustrating part is, by the way, drop your comments. The chat is humming. We'll get to some of them after the break. We appreciate your support. Listen, I think the frustrating thing to me, if you're an Alabama fan, is that to me, what is Alabama right now under Kalen DeBoer? I think that's the thing that I'm trying to figure out, right? Because at the end of the day, listen, everybody's got to have an identity. And it's like, okay, like what is Alabama's identity under Kalen DeBoer? Because guess what? At Washington, potent offense, Heisman quarterback, and I think the thing that really stood out about those Washington teams, they didn't beat themselves, they didn't make mistakes, all of that. Well, fast forward. What is this Alabama team? Haven't developed quarterbacks. Last year, we blamed Jalen Milroe, and I include myself in that, by the way. I blame Jalen Milroe. It's his fault. Wait till they get somebody who's more fit for their system. Wait till Ryan Grubb comes in. Well, it ain't the quarterback's fault this year. They clearly don't run the football well enough. I keep getting told how great this offensive line is. I don't see it when the games are actually played. And then, oh, by the way, on defense, every time they see a quarterback who can make plays with their legs, they have no answer. They had no answer for Diego Pavia last year. They had no answer for Jackson Arnold last year. They had no answer for Thomas Castellanos on Saturday afternoon. And so at what point do they get an identity? Just do one thing well. Like at this point, it's like, forget being Bama of 2013 or 2012 or of Nick Saban, but can you do one thing consistent? Can you be great on offense? Can you be great at quarterback? Can you run the ball? Can you be great on defense? Because I don't know what I'm getting on a game-to-game, minute-to-minute basis. That's the frustrating part. Who are you? What is your identity now that we are 14 games into the Kalen DeBoer era? And to me, I think that's the most frustrating part if you're an Alabama fan, is you go back to yesterday, you go back to this entire 14-game stretch, is that you look at what Alabama is and what they're not. I go back to Kalen DeBoer at Washington, right? And why do we love the Kalen DeBoer hire so much? Coach circles around Dan Lanning through, 3-4 times in the Pac-12. Coach circles around Sark in the bowl game and the college football playoff. Remember, he faced Sark twice at Washington. And the thing about Kalen DeBoer at Washington was he was always prepared. He had his team ready to go. They had things figured out, whatever. And you look at Alabama, and it's the exact opposite. I remember going back and watching the Washington-Oregon Pac-12 championship game, the final year they played in the Pac-12. And if you remember, that was a de facto playoff play-in game. The team that won that game was going to the playoff. That was the year Washington played Michigan for the national title, okay? And I only bring it up because I went back and watched that game, and it was like every big play. Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb had the perfect play call, the perfect situation, the perfect this, the perfect that. And now it's the exact opposite. They just don't seem to know what they kick field goals when they should punt the ball away. They go for it when they should kick field goals. They pass when they should run. The defense can't get stops in obvious situations. There's bad penalties. There's this, there's that, there's whatever. And so I could go on and on. We'll give Florida State credit in a minute, but this is a disaster, and there's nothing else to say. Like, I mean, I'm not really ready to give up on Kalen DeBoer because guess what? He ain't going anywhere. He ain't getting fired after this year. But at some point, we have to acknowledge, like, this thing is going the wrong direction in a hurry. The stat that I put out on Twitter, it stands. Alabama in, 16, 17, 18 years under Nick Saban, he coached 230 games. I know that. They had a total of 4 losses to unranked opponents during 230 games as head coach at Alabama. Fast forward to what we've seen from Kalen DeBoer. He's coached 14 games. He now has 4 losses to unranked opponents. I mean, he doesn't have his team ready. There's nothing else to say. By the way, the other stat that's kind of jarring to me, 2-5 away from Tuscaloosa. So obviously 4 of those 5 losses are to unranked opponents, but 2-5 away from Tuscaloosa. Guess what? In the SEC, I don't care if it's 8 games. I don't care if it's 9 games. I don't care if it's whatever. You got to win games away from home, right? Like at some point you got to beat somebody. Well, guess what? On top of having LSU, which looks awesome at home, Tennessee, which doesn't look like it's going to miss a beat with Joey Aguilar, and of course, Oklahoma, which looked pretty good in the first day of the John Mateer era. Guess what? You got to go to Georgia this year. Good luck with that. I don't think Missouri's a pushover. Missouri didn't look too good on Thursday night, but with the way Alabama's playing, you kidding me? You got to go to South Carolina. They have not played as we're recording here on Sunday morning. And I even go to Auburn. Jackson Arnold's already beaten you. You got to go to Auburn. That place was always tough to play, even when Gus Malzahn was the head coach, whatever, when Nick Saban was the head coach. What a disaster. And to me, this completely falls on Kalen DeBoer. I also just hated the same comments from the players. At some point, you got to acknowledge, you got to figure it out. All right, so Alabama loses. By the way, quick credit to Florida State. I mean, you know the deal. We know what happened to Florida State last year. I do think, by the way, the Florida State thing, to me, it might have just been a worst case scenario. You took the wrong quarterback in DJU, a bunch of injuries. The Jalen Lucas kid who killed Alabama on Saturday was hurt all of last year. Roydell Williams, who came from Alabama, was hurt all of last year. And so I just wondered. But credit Mike Norvell. He gave back a bunch of salary. Gus Malzahn, did you see the tweet from Gus Malzahn? No producer Matt today, otherwise we'd pop up the tweet. But he said it felt like old times. The insinuation being like, I always kind of had Alabama's number, didn't I? But Gus Malzahn, Florida State gets the win. I'll say this. All of a sudden, you look at Florida State, we'll see what Miami looks like. But, I mean, with the way Clemson looked, you mean to tell me that Florida State can't beat Clemson going forward? That they can't compete for an ACC title? I'm happy for Mike Norvell. I never really believed he was as bad as things looked last year, but they were a disaster. 2-10, average 15 points per game. 31 on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Stories Alabama. It's unbelievable. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. When we do, we're going to go ahead and get to some of your questions and comments. Actually, Luke has a great comment about Kalen DeBoer. We'll discuss that. We got to talk Texas, Ohio State, but I have flipped. I was pretty tough on Arch Manning yesterday. Today, though, I think the more that I think about it, the more that I think it might be on Steve Sarkisian. So we'll take a quick break. We'll come back, talk Texas, Ohio State. We will also talk, oh, by the way, on top of that, LSU with the big win. Quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, I have so many people that reach out and say, Torres, you give me hours and hours and hours of free content every day, every month, every year. What can I do to help support the show? Well, you want to support the show and look good in the process. Make sure to check out and support the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Some of you wondering, what can I get in that merch store, Torres? Well, Kentucky fans, we got our Mark Pope Hope and Pope t-shirts. That is right. Mark Pope, monster first year. Year 2 is going to be even better. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirt at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is coming. It is here. John Calipari has things rocking. Get your Big Pig Invasion tees. Again, aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. St. John's fans, we have our Big Rick Energy t-shirts. And if you're just a college basketball fan in general, guess what? Your March is for Day Drinking shirt. That is the shirt that you need year-round, but especially for the next NCAA tournament. You can order yours now. By the way, football fans, we got you covered too. Auburn fans, we already know the freeze warning has hit the plains. Make sure to get your freeze warning t-shirts. Also, Nebraska fans, new era, new rules, the t-shirt that you need before the start of this coming season. And oh, by the way, if you're a Colorado fan, if you're just a Coach Prime fan, we have our Dion shirts and hats, more of them than we know what to do with. So to check out the full line of Aaron Torres Media merch and also support the show, good news is we're going to have even more for the fall. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And for more information, you can always reach out at Aaron Torres Podcast Questions gmail.com. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Good to be back. So tell you what, do want to keep the conversation going here. Busy Saturday in college football. As we get to some of the other games, though, you already know what we got to do. We got to thank our friends. We got to thank our partners. We got to thank America's #1 ticketing app, SeatGeek and SeatGeek.com. Okay, so SeatGeek, #1 ticketing app. As I said, how about this? They have been downloaded over 28 million times, and they are the official ticketing partner of the Aaron Torres pod. Thing that I love about SeatGeek, they tell you if your tickets are good or not. They give you a green dot. Green means go ahead and purchase. Red dot means you might want to slow up on that one. That one probably isn't the ticket for you, okay? So SeatGeek.com, downloaded 28 million times, but here's the best part. They are taking care of listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. They did it during March Madness. They are back for football, and we so very much appreciate them. If you are a listener of the Aaron Torres pod, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Don't tell anybody. Actually, you can't tell anybody. Tell everybody, as a matter of fact, that they have a special offer for listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. All you got to do is go to SeatGeek.com or download the SeatGeek app. If you use promo code Torres, how about this? You get $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres, get $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres. All right, drop your questions, your comments into the chat. I want to get to some of them. This, I think, Luke, I hate to say this if you're an Alabama fan, I'm starting to think this more and more. DeBoer got completely glazed after one good run with a generational QB in the previous coach's roster. He's a nice guy, but a fraud coach. Well, listen, the thing I'll say about DeBoer, what did he go, like 58-2 at Sioux Falls? I know it was NAIA, whatever, but like he did have a track record of winning, basically won right away at Fresno. His first year was the COVID year. The second year was a disaster. I do think the more that I think about it, though, if you go back to that season at Washington, they won 1,000,000 one-score games, and it just felt like they found ways to win. And the more that I think about it, the more that I think it might have been Michael Penix. Now, he deserves credit for elevating Michael Penix, but it doesn't change the fact that in hindsight, Kalen DeBoer may be getting a little bit too much credit for what he did at Washington. Maybe it was more on Michael Penix. By the way, Paul already trying to use the SeatGeek. He says, go figure. Auburn at A&M is over $400 even without the promo code. Well, guess what, Paul? I'm just trying to help here. Listen, it's not my fault that everybody wants to go to A&M Auburn. But if you use SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres, you are going to go ahead and get $20 off. We appreciate your support, Paul. Figure out a way to use that promo code. I know you'll appreciate it. All right, let's go ahead and switch gears. By the way, drop your thoughts on the Texas-Ohio State game in a minute, because I do want to go ahead and switch gears. Do want to talk about Texas-Ohio State. And let me start by saying this. So again, another one where we did a little bit of a reaction to it on Saturday afternoon. And the thing that stands out, I actually have a little bit of a different take, but let's go ahead and dive in. Listen, I said this all week, is that it felt to me like, it felt to me like Texas, like Clemson LSU, which we're going to get into in a minute. That was the game that college football diehards understood. Like, that's the one where there are real stakes. Brian Kelly loses this game, whatever. We'll discuss that game in a minute. Texas-Ohio State was the game for the casuals, though, right? Defending national champion, #1 team in the country, two huge brands. And, oh, by the way, Arch Manning making his debut. What's interesting about Texas-Ohio State, I'll say this, is because I did tweet this out on Saturday morning leading into the game. So much talk about Arch Manning. So much talk about Texas's defense. So much talk about all the new players at Ohio State. I said this almost sarcastically, but it ended up coming to fruition. I'm going to read you what I tweeted heading into the Texas-Ohio State game on Saturday morning, and I'm not taking credit for this. I just think it's funny how it worked out. I tweeted, random thought, but I don't think any one person can rehabilitate his image more today than Matt Patricia, who, of course, is the new Ohio State defensive coordinator. In every piece of Texas-Ohio State preview content, I have yet to hear one person say, you know what, I trust Matt Patricia's defense. He has a chance to prove a lot of his critics wrong today. And oh, by the way, I am very much one of those critics, so I'm not going to sit here and claim that I had some secret sauce and I knew something that people didn't. Well, I bring it up because how about this? Matt Patricia's listen, if there was a game ball that went out for this game, there's no doubt that it was Matt Patricia's defense. I know that Texas actually had more total yards of offense, but I just bring it up because Matt Patricia's defense kept both Arch Manning and Steve Sarkisian on their toes. Ohio State wins 14-7 in a game that you all know plenty about by now, okay? So as far as this game is concerned, so I got a couple thoughts on this. The first one, we do have to talk Arch Manning, okay? Because to me, listen, it was a disappointment. And I think it is fair to question the people that, to quote Luke, glazed Arch Manning all offseason. Now, listen, I'm guilty of doing some glazing, okay? I glazed Alabama and Kalen DeBoer, maybe glazed Clemson a little bit too much as well. But I said with Arch Manning, I said, look, it's not that I don't understand the hype, but can we see him play meaningful football before we crown him anything? Listen, Paul Feinbaum, I know he's getting, dragged on social media. Paul Feinbaum just says stuff to get a reaction. He's great at saying stuff in sound bites that get people talking, okay? But at the same time, this whole, he's going to be the best player since Tebow. It's like, what are we even talking about? And I go back to what I said all summer. I said two things. I said, one, maybe he does end up winning the Heisman Trophy. Maybe he does end up as the best player in college football this year. But if he does, we have no tangible proof that he's actually capable of doing it. And the only reason that he is being anointed the next great quarterback, the Heisman Trophy favorite, is because of the fact that his last name is Manning, okay? And I said it yesterday, and I said it all summer long. If you want to argue, he's a former five-star. Of course he's capable. He's at Texas. Well, guess what? Julian Saint's a former five-star. Nobody was naming him the preseason Heisman favorite. Ty Simpson. Nobody named him the preseason Heisman favorite. So I just bring it up because this notion that we were supposed to believe that Arch Manning was the guy, I never bought it. And then I actually go back to not what Paul Feinbaum said, but what Steve Spurrier said during the summer, because I thought it was 1,000% accurate. Do you remember what he said in about early to mid-July? I remember talking about it right around July 4th. He said, if Arch Manning was so good, how did he not beat out Quinn Ewers last year? Quinn Ewers is a seventh round pick. Steve Sarkisian coached completely around him. If Arch Manning was some generational prospect, why did he not see the field last year? And then, oh, by the way, people forget this. Arch Manning did see the field. He started 2 games. What was he? 14 of 29 against UL Monroe. Now, he was, to his credit, very good against Mississippi State. But I keep going back to that Georgia game. He got in the game. He looked like a deer in headlights. People pretended like it didn't happen. And to me, that's probably the reason that Sark never really went back to him, was because he realized that I got to ride or die with Quinn Ewers. And so I bring it up to say with Arch Manning that there was never a reason to believe that he was going to be this generational quarterback. Maybe he gets there someday, but we had no proof. And I think we saw it on Saturday, right? There's no other way to put it. He was underwhelming. 17 of 30 passing, 170 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. By the way, the touchdown was juggled and easily could have been overturned. There was a second interception that was overturned on the field. It was the right call, but he easily could have had more than 1 interception. But from the beginning, he looked confused. He looked nervous. He looked anxious. He just didn't look that good, right? A first ball right into the dirt. Think that's kind of worth noting. By the way, I think this is something that stood out to me with Arch. How about the fact, how many times, it didn't happen often, but 2 or 3 times, he's trying to do the Patrick Mahomes sidearm. And it's like, bro, can you complete a normal pass before we start worrying about being Patrick Mahomes and sidearming the ball and this and that? And so it was completely underwhelming. I didn't think he looked very good. But let me also say this, because I've had 24 hours to think about this. And the more that I think about it, the more that I realize, I don't know if I'm being too hard on Arch Manning, but what I do realize, I'm not being hard enough on Steve Sarkisian, okay? Because here's the thing about Sark, right? So Sark has been anointed this incredible genius, best ever, but not best ever, but you get the point. He's this genius. He's great. He's he's an offensive savant. Okay, well, let's talk about Sark for a second, because if you go back to last year, there was no doubt that Steve Sarkisian was absolutely, unequivocally coaching around Quinn Ewers. If you watch those games, you could tell he did not trust Quinn Ewers. He trusted his defense. He trusted the run game. He was afraid to let Quinn Ewers do too much, and he was afraid that Quinn Ewers would eventually cost him games. And so to me, that matters for this reason. If the argument was you're afraid to let Quinn Ewers loose, okay, but you are the offensive genius, then to immediately go into the Arch Manning era and you're again coaching tight, you're again afraid to let him loose. Here's my question is at what point do we have to, now maybe Steve Sarkisian isn't an offensive genius, because I sit there and I look at this, right? And I sit there and think to myself, this is that Steve Sarkisian now, this is his second hand-picked quarterback at Texas, who also, by the way, is a former 5-star and many believe to be a generational prospect coming out of high school. It's easy to forget this now. Quinn Ewers was quite literally one of the highest rated quarterbacks in the history of 24/7's recruiting service. I think he had a perfect 1,000 score. I think it was him and Vince Young. And there was 3 guys in the history of 24/7 that had a perfect score coming out of high school. Quinn Ewers was one of them. Well, there's no doubt that over Quinn Ewers' time at Texas, at minimum, he didn't really get better. I think he got better from that first year to the second year. The first year he was kind of out of shape. He got hurt against Alabama, whatever. But year 2 to year 3, he did not get better. And so if the argument was you didn't want to rush Arch in, you had to protect him, whatever. Well, it's year 3, and you're now coaching tight with Arch Manning. And so to me, the question very simply becomes, if you're this offensive genius, think about what we saw across college football over the last couple of days, right? Thomas Castellanos, first game in the Gus Malzahn system, looked completely comfortable. Joey Aguilar, first game in the Tennessee system under Josh Heupel, looked completely comfortable. If you stayed up late, we're going to talk Utah, UCLA. Nico didn't look so good, but Devin Dampier, first game at Utah. I know the offensive coordinator came with him, but he looked completely comfortable. Arch Manning has been in the Texas system for 3 years and looked like a deer in headlights. And so, again, I understand that it's Ohio State. I understand that we can't just, every game is not the same. It was on the road. It was whatever. Ohio State has 11 NFL guys on their defense. But at some point, if Sark is an offensive genius, why do all his quarterbacks look tight, play tight, he coaches tight? At some point, that falls on him. Good news for Texas is, listen, next 3 weeks, pretty freaking easy. The next 3 games, San Jose State at home, UTEP at home, Sam Houston at home. Then it gets a lot tougher, though. At Florida, Oklahoma, in Dallas. And so good news for Arch Manning. He's got plenty of time to figure things out. But listen, he didn't look the part. The guy that we were promised, we just did not see on Saturday afternoon. But I also put a lot of this on Sark. This is now his second handpicked, reportedly generational quarterback. At minimum, the recruiting services believed he was a 5-star. Sark hasn't figured it out. At some point, it does fall on the head coach. At some point, I don't care how well you're recruiting. At some point, you got to develop a quarterback, and he has yet to do that at the college level. So Texas gets the loss. By the way, obviously credit Ohio State. I don't think that there's going to be I don't think there's some amazing takeaway. Ryan Day, to his credit, had his team better prepared. Julian Sayin was good enough. They got the ball to Jeremiah Smith, unlike the last year when they sometimes forgot about him, Michigan more specifically. I don't think there's some amazing Ohio State takeaway. They're awesome. By the way, they were my pick to win the Big Ten. I still don't believe in Penn State, so want to go ahead and give Ohio State credit. But the story here is Texas. It's just frustrating to watch. It's just frustrating to watch Steve Sarkisian, this offensive genius, not be able to figure out the quarterback situation. All right, let's go ahead and switch gears. And I do want to talk about the other big game. I do want to go ahead and talk about a game. Let's call a spade a spade. Torres got a lot of stuff wrong this weekend. And if there was one game that I was sure that I knew how it was going down, it was LSU Clemson, right? Clemson's at home. Yeah, I know they lost in the playoff, but they won the ACC last year, had a lot of momentum. Cade Klubnik was excellent. Really after the Georgia game all season long. Clemson's got it figured out. They got the culture. They're now taking a transfer or two while keeping everything in-house. And then there's LSU. Brian Kelly, I've been a Brian Kelly supporter, but, listen, it kind of got to the point where it's like, listen, last year was year 3. You go 8-4. I kept saying this last year. They didn't even really look like LSU. Didn't really have receivers who could really separate. Didn't really have dudes on the defensive line. The O-line, I kept being told how great it was. They couldn't run the football. And I just kind of said, like, a bunch of new pieces. I don't believe in Garrett Nussmeier. They go to the portal to revamp the O-line, revamp the wide receiver room. And it's like, it's a lot of new pieces on defense. I just don't know what to make of LSU. Well, I bring it up because I do now. I thought LSU, you could argue, given where they played and who they played, was the most impressive team in college football on Saturday. I know Ohio State beat Texas, but Ohio State was at home. I'm not trying to dismiss Ohio State, but if I had an AP vote, I would give the number 1 vote in next week, going into week 2, to the LSU Tigers. They get the 17-10 win. And I got to admit, I was wrong on Brian Kelly. I was wrong on LSU. They deserve a ton of credit. So let's go ahead and dive in. As far as LSU is concerned, I think what stood out to me is from the beginning, it was just like very obvious that they were not intimidated by that environment. Remember, last year they played USC in Vegas. It's kind of a back and forth deal. Never really felt like they were in control. Certainly were never in control 2 years ago against Florida State when they played, I believe it was in Orlando. From the beginning, I mean, they didn't really take the lead for good until late in the game, until in the fourth quarter. But you just kind of felt like, okay, they're not only are they hanging, they're moving the ball very well. On offense, they were running the ball. Remember, last year they could not run the ball at all. I'm not sitting here saying that, they look like the Pony Express or anything, but Caden Durham picks up a big run early in the game. They're able to move the ball consistently. Thought Garrett Nussmeier, to his credit, looked totally poised in the pocket. That new receiving core was kind of led by an old name, Aaron Anderson, who's now been there for a couple years. But to me, you know what the story was? And I don't think it's going to be some big shock to hear this. The story was the defense. Listen, I'll say this. I thought the defense would be improved. If you remember 2 years ago, LSU had Jaden Daniels as their quarterback, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas at wide receiver. And it was the defense that cost LSU a national championship. I remember arguing with people because when Jaden Daniels won the Heisman and people said, how can somebody win the Heisman after losing 3 games? And I said, did you watch Jaden Daniels? If you didn't, they would have lost probably 5 or 6 games if it wasn't for Jaden Daniels. And so the defense was broken. They brought in Blake Baker last year. Say that 10 times fast. Brought in Blake Baker. They brought in Blake Baker, new defensive coordinator from Missouri. And I just bring it up because last year, there was clear improvement, but I still said, they got a lot of new pieces in the portal. How good are they going to be? Story of this game was the defense. The defense has taken yet another step. The defense has taken another, they look like a top, they look like an LSU defense, if we're being completely honest. Okay. In this game, I think that's the thing that stood out. Cade Klubnik was on his heels the entire game. The same way that Matt Patricia kept Arch Manning on his heels, Cade Klubnik, now a third-year starter quarterback, had no answers. That defense completely got after him. And what I thought was so impressive was this was a team that went really heavy in the portal. And we know sometimes in the portal you hit, sometimes you miss, sometimes you this, sometimes you that. Well, you go back and look, their dudes were flying all over the field, and it was a lot of guys that they got out of the portal. Patrick Payton from Florida State made a couple really big plays. The Jack Pyburn kid from Florida made a couple really big plays. To Marcus Cooley out of the portal made a couple big plays. By the way, AJ Halsey, this was a funny story. Did you guys see this during the broadcast? They mentioned this, but that LSU was not aware that AJ Halsey got thrown out of his last game. He transferred in from Houston, and Clemson actually reported it to the ACC office. They're like, wait a second now. This kid got thrown out of his last game, so he's not playing in the first half of the opener, right? So got thrown out of his last game last year, does not play in the opener, comes in the second half, and is phenomenal. And so to me, that's the story of this team, is that defense has made huge leaps, huge strides. By the way, I got to give credit to the Barstool LSU account. By the way, we do have a Torres on LSU account. Make sure you're following that. But I got to give credit to the Barstool LSU account. They brought up, I thought, a really good point. Remember when there was that bidding war for Bryce Young late last year, and LSU for a minute was in it, and then Michigan kept upping the ante, and finally LSU had to bow out of the Bryce Underwood recruitment. And listen, this isn't a knock on Michigan, because Bryce Underwood actually looked very good on Saturday night against New Mexico. But at the same time, the Barstool LSU account brought up a great point of not spending all that money on Bryce Young allowed them to go get 5, 6, 7 difference makers on defense. It's almost like, everybody's talking about the Micah Parsons trade right now, and Jerry Jones keeps referencing the Herschel Walker trade. It's like, kind of worked out for the Cowboys. You trade Herschel Walker, you get 1 million draft picks. That one player turns into 6, 7, 8 impact players. And I kind of feel the same way about LSU, is that you look at the decision to kind of just bow out of the Bryce Underwood sweepstakes, and let's just say it got to 2.5 million, whatever it was. Like, that gets you a lot of players out of the portal on defense. And then, oh, by the way, of course, you had to retain Garrett Nussmeier. I get all that. But I just bring it up because that, to me, was the difference. Those dudes on defense were flying around. They looked incredible. And I'll just say this about LSU. I just got to go ahead and give them a ton of credit, because to me, again, they looked like, in my opinion, the best team in college football on Saturday. This was a team that, listen, I got to own it, didn't have them in the playoffs, but I got to readily admit, I was wrong on Brian Kelly. I kind of thought, if it doesn't work out this year, how much longer is he going to get? What if it's not the answer? What if it's not this? What if it's not that? Well, guess what? Brian Kelly has himself a team that competes in all 3 phases. By the way, offense under Garrett Nussmeier, I know they quote unquote only put up 17 points, but 1, that Clemson defense is filthy. 2, they clearly move the ball much better than much better than Clemson, finished with 246 yards passing and 356 yards overall. By the way, if I didn't mention the LSU defense holding Clemson to 32 yards rushing on 19 carries, shame on me, because they were incredible. But counter to that, the LSU offense, they were moving the ball. Aaron Anderson looked awesome. By the way, that touchdown that was taken off the board was like one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. Don't know that I've ever seen them argue on the TV broadcast. Okay, it's clearly a catch. It's just whether his feet were inbounds before he crossed the pylon or not. And then they called it no catch. And Bill LeMonnier, or however you say his name, was like apoplectic about it. So they they should have had another touchdown. But just complete domination. And so I just want to give LSU credit. And it's so funny how 1 week can completely change narratives and conversations and whatever. I still think LSU's got a tough schedule, because they have to go to Oklahoma. They get Florida at home, and they still have Ole Miss and Florida before the end of this month in Oxford, and then Florida at home. But all of a sudden, you look at that schedule, it does feel a little bit different, right? That Alabama game, November 1st, it feels a lot different than it did 24 hours ago. And so I got to give credit. Listen, I think in this world of college football, I think we're past the days of teams just going 12-0 in the Big Ten, or the SEC, excuse me. Big Ten, I think it's going to be hard too. I know Oregon did it last year. But this LSU team looks like the best team in the SEC. I got to give them credit. I was not expecting them to do what they did at Clemson. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. When we do, we'll get to a couple more of your questions. We'll obviously prioritize any super chats, but do want to go ahead and wrap the show. Couple more stories, including just stay up to watch the Nico Iamaleava debut. Tennessee fans, I didn't know there were so many Utah fans in the state of Tennessee. We'll take a quick break. We will come back, talk Nico Iamaleava, as well as some of the other big stories of the Saturday and Friday in college football. Quick break. Be right back. What's up, everybody? It's AT, and I've told you before, when I'm on the road, when I'm podcasting, sometimes you end up looking like a slob. Look at me, mismatched socks. I'm wearing shorts. What am I doing? The folks at FioBox said, Torres, let's get you some fresh gear to look better when you're on camera. Well, what do you think? This is all part of the spring collection for FioBox. These jeans, perfect when I want to go to games, casual, serious, business casual, you name it. Got the quarter zip. And oh, by the way, we got this perfect zip. This is the perfect spring, summer zip that you can wear when you're out with friends. Maybe it gets a little chilly. Maybe it's a little chilly in the morning. Perfect for all occasions. So this is what I need you to do. If you like what you see, and you should, what I need you to do is visit FioBox.com. That's FioBox.com, FIOBOC. By the way, FioBox has a special promo code for listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. Use promo code Torres and get 20% off your purchase. Thank you again to FioBox. By the way, make sure that you're following them on social media at FioBox, FIOBOC. Thank you, FioBox. All right, everybody. I am back. Good to be back. Good to be back. Final segment of the show. So good to be back. Do want to go ahead and wrap a couple quick things before we get out of here. First of all, Tice Summerall says Bryce Underwood is him. Don't know how much we'll be talking Michigan. I thought they looked pretty good. I thought he looked very poised for a true fresh. I mean, listen, I know it was New Mexico. I know there's a big difference between New Mexico and some of these teams these other quarterbacks faced. But who do you feel like Bryce Underwood looked poised. Bryce Underwood looked confident. Looked more confident than Arch Manning. And don't just tell me that Arch Manning played a much better team because he threw the ball in the dirt the first time. 251 yards passing, one passing touchdown. By the way, Justice Haynes looked phenomenal in that game as well. Again, I know that Michigan played New Mexico. We're not going to overreact, but I do think that's important. Paul, this cracks me up. I said apoplectic at some point. Paul says this is football, Aaron, and it's Sunday morning. We don't know what apoplectic means. I don't even know how to explain it. Like, I just think angry, whatever, maybe is the right way to go. Let's see here. A couple other of your comments. Kyle, interesting conversation here. Why is everyone so shocked about Sark? Goodness, the effing media kisses his butt and props him up as some elite play caller. Listen, Kyle, listen, I might have to take an L on this. Listen, I've never thought that Sark was amazing, but I will say, I did think he was rehabbed. I did think, the Texas thing. Listen, where I think to me that the Sark is an elite play caller narrative to me really took shape was the way he turned Mac Jones basically into a Heisman. He took Mac Jones from probably undraftable to a first-round pick. And so maybe that year Alabama just had that much more talent than everybody else. Maybe I need to just go ahead and acknowledge that. I don't know. But that was where I was just like, oh, Sark is special. Then you get to Texas, and again, year one, it's a disaster. Don't really blame him. Who was his opening day quarterback? Was it Hudson Card in that year? Anyway, Hudson Card, but he has Quinn Ewers for 3 years. Quinn Ewers did not really get better year over year, and now Arch Manning looks like a disaster. Maybe I just need to own that Quinn Ewers is not, or Sark isn't nearly as good as we thought. I just don't know. Really quickly, let's see. Couple of interesting comments. Luke Schumacher, brutal week for Feinbaum after Arch and Bama's performances. Can't wait to hear the legend tomorrow. Listen, I'm not here to criticize other media members, but Paul Feinbaum just so very clearly does stuff for attention, and it's just like, I don't know what else there is to say. I guess I give him credit. I mean, I don't know what else there is to say, but not a big fan. Not a big fan at all. All right, let's go ahead and wrap the show. There is, people, one more topic that I do want to get to. We'll take off the Clemson and LSU logos. How about this? Producer Matt was at Baylor Auburn on Friday, so he has the day off. He's traveling today. I didn't even have producer Matt make a UCLA Utah frame because I did not know that I would be talking about this, okay? But I do want to wrap the show with what I believe to be maybe the most, you can't say it's more interesting than Alabama losing and just being a total train wreck. But I'll tell you this, I don't know how many people stayed up until 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern time to watch the UCLA-Utah game because you certainly got a show. There was certainly an interesting narrative. And I'll say this too, if you paid attention, there was a phenomenal transfer quarterback on the field. It just wasn't the one we thought. As Nico Iamaleava and his new team, the UCLA Bruins, took on the Utah Utes. Well, there was not just two Utes. There was 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 11 on each side of the ball that absolutely destroyed UCLA. Final score in this game, 43-10. Utah, 493 yards of total offense. Devin Dampier, he looked like the truth. Devin Dampier, the transfer from New Mexico. Remember, he comes over to Utah with his offensive coordinator. 21 of 25 passing, 206 yards, 2 touchdown passes, 87 yards rushing, and 1 TD. Of course, if it was only about Utah, we would not be talking about it. As I always say, the more interesting story is often in the losing locker room, and it certainly was on Saturday as Nico Iamaleava, the quarterback that everybody's got to take on. It was a train wreck. It was a disaster. It was maybe even worse than we were expecting, if that's possible. So let's go ahead and dive in, because I not only think this is going to turn into a cautionary tale, but Tennessee fans, take your victory lap. You absolutely deserve it. You were 100% right. Those of us who defended Josh Heupel were 100% right. And I do hate to say this part, but I do think Nico Iamaleava is going to be a cautionary tale. Let's go ahead and dive in. First of all, as far as Nico is concerned, by the way, again, credit Utah, credit Devin Dampier, whatever. As far as Nico is concerned, the stats were bad. Nico Iamaleava, who, of course, just 8-9 months ago was playing in a college football playoff, 11 of 22 passing, 136 yards, 6 yards per completion, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Not good. He also, by the way, led UCLA in rushing, 13 carries, 47 yards, no touchdowns. But let me say this. For people who don't know, I host Fox Sports Radio. Do me a favor, by the way. We have pinned the Fox Sports Radio podcast at the top of the feed. Go ahead and just download that. Help your boy Torres out. But I bring it up because it's one thing to just see final stats. It's another thing if you were watching the game and Nico was probably worse than the final stats would indicate. And I will take it a step further. I think the performance overall was even worse. Because first of all, and I saw this on Twitter, UCLA fans are already turning on Nico. I saw 2, 3, 4 different UCLA tweets. It's not like UCLA has some crazy passionate fan base that's just, piss and vinegar and fire in the belly and ready to yell and scream at first notice. But what did they notice? The same thing that Tennessee fans did. Overthrows, misreads, can't accurately read defenses. I hate to say it, but it's the truth. We go back to last year at Tennessee, and I've said it since the day that Nico even thought about entering the transfer portal. Tennessee last year won despite Nico. They won because of Dylan Sampson and Tim Banks' defense. They won despite the quarterback play. And I think UCLA fans are seeing that. Overthrows, misreads. By the way, when he actually left the pocket, just got blasted 2, 3, 4 times. And so you go to that game and you go to the bigger picture. And to me, it's exactly what I just talked about. You think about Nico, you think about the situation. Tennessee fans were right. Anybody who defended Nico was wrong. And I think this is going to go down as one of the worst decisions that we have ever seen, even in this NIL era, because you go back to the decision itself. And we all know the reasons that Nico and his family said it's about family. No, it's not. Your family had a house. Your family was with you in Knoxville. I know people that live in Knoxville. They said family was there all the time. I don't know if they literally lived there 365 days a year because his younger brother was playing football back in LA. They were there a lot. They said it was about family. They said it was about the people around him. We're going to get to that in a second. But here is the bottom line. It's going to go down as one of the worst decisions ever, one of the worst misplays ever, because at the end of the day, it's not about, and I hate to say this for both UCLA fans and Tennessee fans, it's about, college is about developing for your professional future, okay? And the second he entered the transfer portal, we talked about it on the show, it was so obvious. It is that basically, no matter where he ended up, it was going to be a worse football. It was certainly going to be for less money, but it was going to be a worse football situation that put him in less of a position to succeed. And I think that's the part where I don't want to say I feel bad for Nico, because I don't, but I do think this is going to be a cautionary tale. Because you look at the situation at UCLA, you know what cracked me up? I was thinking about this, and I actually tweeted it on Saturday night. I guess it was Sunday morning, probably on the East Coast by the time many Tennessee fans saw it. But I was thinking about this. Remember after the playoff loss, what was the big story? Because Nico and all his family say, well, it wasn't about the money. That's BS. That's nonsense. But let's put that aside. The story that you kept hearing was that Nico and his family were not happy, were not satisfied with the talent around him. Okay. They thought the O-line wasn't good enough. They thought the receivers weren't good enough. Well, fast forward, if they were unhappy at Tennessee, what the heck are they thinking about the situation at UCLA right now? Because again, if you watch that game, Nico got sacked 4 times. Utah had 5 TFLs, and there were a couple times in the open field where he got blasted. I mean, blasted, okay? And it's like, if you were unhappy with that situation, what do you make of the current situation at UCLA? Because that O-line ain't as good. By the way, you know whose O-line looked pretty good on Saturday? Tennessee's. That was without David Sanders, the number 1 recruit in America at offensive tackle, by the way. He did not play on Saturday. The O-line looked pretty good, though. So the O-line wasn't good enough, according to Nico. Yeah, it's much worse at UCLA. And by the way, it ain't going to get easier in the Big Ten. I know we like to make fun of the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten is actually, a much improved football conference. But you still play Ohio State. You still play Penn State. Even Indiana, I know didn't look great, but Indiana's got dudes. Washington's got dudes. USC put up 70 points. If it was that bad against Utah, it ain't going to get easier when you play Ohio State and Penn State and Washington and USC, whatever. By the way, the receivers, he needed better receivers. Okay, congrats. You have someone named Anthony Woods who led UCLA in receiving 3 catches, 48 yards. Quasi Gilmer, I know that was the big name that everybody was excited about at UCLA, finished with 3 catches, 31 yards. Oh, by the way, Tennessee, again, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but on Saturday, let's go ahead and look at what Tennessee's receivers did, the receivers that Nico left behind. You go back and look. What's his name? Mike Matthews, who we all knew was going to be good. 2 catches, 29 yards. Braylon Staley, 4 catches, 95 yards and a touchdown. Deshaun Bishop, I know, is a running back out of the backfield, but had a couple nice catches. Overall, 247 yards of receiving production out of that Tennessee offense. 247 yards receiving for Tennessee. Compare that with 136 for UCLA. By the way, while we're on the subject, Tennessee fans, I mean, you were right. And now here's the real conversation. Did Tennessee get the better of this quarterback trade? One, they saved money. It's almost like we talked about with LSU. LSU, by losing out on Bryce Underwood, was able to spend money elsewhere. Well, Tennessee now isn't paying $2 million, $2.5 million to their quarterback. They can spend it in other places. And it's like, Tennessee, to me, the defense wasn't perfect, but that very much looks like another team that could compete in the SEC. Everybody talks about, the SEC is going to get 4 teams. Tennessee's probably got the easiest schedule out of everybody in the SEC. And again, I know they play Bama, Georgia, and Florida, so it can't be too easy. But they also get Vandy. They also get Arkansas. They get Kentucky, whatever. This isn't necessarily about Tennessee, but Joey Aguilar very much looked the part. 3 touchdown passes in that game for the Tennessee Vols. I give him credit. He looked very comfortable in that Josh Heupel system. Game 1. By the way, remember in the offseason, Deshaun Foster, the UCLA head coach, he gave that weird interview with Bruce Feldman that was kind of just, it was basically a puff piece. Let's call it what it was. I mean, it should have been it should have been sponsored by UCLA Athletics. But I bring it up because in that piece, Deshaun Foster, I want to keep calling him Deshaun Watson, took this little dig at Joey Aguilar of we just weren't happy with some of his preparation. It's like, okay, dude, whatever, screw you, man. And took a cheap shot at a quarterback that believed in you. Joey Aguilar looked fine. You know who didn't? Nico Iamaleava, total train wreck. Tennessee fans, you were right. And Tennessee, I don't think there's any doubt, is going to be better off. All right, really quickly, we got some Tennessee fans in the chat. Tennessee Rocky Top says, actually, Torres, it's Joey Swagular. Let's go ahead and get it right. He says, Joey definitely ain't paying for steak or beer in Knoxville. Hey, listen, Tennessee Rocky Top, let's save the beer till we make the college football playoff. But yeah, Joey Swagular, I apologize. I also saw Joey Football. Joey Football, he ain't paying for steak anytime soon. Great point by Tennessee Rocky Top, who has joined the chat. Tennessee definitely won the trade. Imagine making less money on a worse team in a SHI hockey stick conference. Nico played himself. Listen, really quickly, we don't have to relitigate the whole Nico thing. This is why you have a real agent. This is why parents need to stay out of the way. I'm sure Nico's dad in his heart believes that he was doing what's best. There's a reason you have a real agent, not your buddy from down the street. I'm sorry. I hate to be a jerk. I don't care if that sounds bad. It's the truth. It is the truth. That's why you have a real agent. It's why you don't mess around with your son's future. And oh, by the way, he screwed up his second son as well, who was at Arkansas making good money. And now he's getting sued by Arkansas. All right. I'll tell you what. We'll get to a couple more of your comments in a second. Drop some last second comments and we'll get to them. Before we do, though, we got to thank our final partner, our final friend. We love working with them. They are the best. Collie Puffs, ColliePuffs.com. By the way, I got a few Collie Puffs right here. So look at these puppies. All right. So listen, it's football season, right? You're sitting on the couch. You're watching a ton of games. You probably spent 12, 13, 14, 15 hours on the couch on Saturday. And you, my friend, you need a snack that is both healthy but delicious, something you're going to love, something your kids are going to love, something that is not going to make you a big, filthy slob. You need Collie Puffs. Okay, first of all, love the story of this company. I've told it before. Family-owned company, not far from where I live. Joey, a huge football fan. He's actually a Rams season ticket holder. I was supposed to go to the preseason game with him 2 weeks ago. Neither here nor there. But I bring it up because he was sitting on the couch. He said, I need a snack that's healthy but delicious, something I'm going to love, something my kids are going to love. He came up with Collie Puffs. What's the difference between this and the crap in your grocery aisle? Baked, not fried. Avocado oil, no grease. But they taste freaking delicious. Okay, at this point, you don't have to take my word for it. Go ahead and try Collie Puffs out for yourself. ColliePuffs.com. That's CAULIPUFFS.com. ColliePuffs.com. Here's the great part. Use promo code Torres. You get 15% off any purchase, not just your first purchase, but any purchase. 15% off promo code Torres. 15% off promo code Torres. Thank you to Collie Puffs. We appreciate their support of the Aaron Torres pod. Really quickly before we get out of here, let's get to a couple more questions and comments. Tennessee Rocky Top says Tennessee versus LSU for the SEC. Mark it down. Remember where you heard it first. Listen, it's hard for me to argue. I thought for sure I got to give credit because I thought LSU looked like the best team in college football on Saturday. And I say that as somebody who did not have them in the playoff, thought they were overrated. And then I'll say this with Tennessee, I didn't have them in the playoff. And one thing about me, I generally don't listen to other people and try to avoid what other people say. But I saw a lot of people down on Tennessee, and I didn't really get it. I said, easiest schedule in the SEC. By SEC standards, it's very easy. But then also on top of that, I said, look, they've always been able to run the ball under Heupel. What is the stat, Tennessee Rocky Top? You may know. I think it's every year they've had Heupel as the head coach, top 3 or top 4 in the SEC in rushing. And Tim Banks' defense is filthy. And by the way, here's the thing about the defense. Didn't even play that well on Saturday. Jermon McCoy wasn't even in. I actually thought Colton Hood played really well, had that scoop and score. So bring it up to say that I think that team is only going to get better. Luke brought up this point a minute ago, and I think that's very interesting. He says all of a sudden that UGA Tennessee game in 2 weeks looks a lot different and better for the home team. 100%. I'm not saying that I was ready to dismiss Tennessee's ability to win at home because that is going to be Gunnar Stockton's first career road start. But at the same time, all of a sudden you look up and you look at that Tennessee schedule. I know you have at Alabama. I know you have at Florida, which is all of a sudden a November game, which is weird. I'll say this, you win that. If you beat Georgia at home, probably going to the college football playoff. You're probably going to 10-2, right? Because, listen, you never know in the SEC, and it's not easy. And you do have at Florida, at Bama. But all of a sudden, at Bama don't look so like this impossible game anymore. Kalen DeBoer, man, he is such a mess. I can't believe it. Anyway, Luke Schumacher's point, UGA at Tennessee 2 weeks from now. Really quickly, Luke, you're probably right. Missouri's schedule is easier. Paul says Texas's schedule is the easiest. It isn't this year, Paul. At Georgia, at Florida. And that's already with a loss on their schedule. I know that Ohio State doesn't count for the SEC standings, but listen, you lose at Florida, at Georgia. All of a sudden, where are the great wins going to be on your resume? I guess maybe Oklahoma would be one if you are able to take care of business. Texas A&M at home to end the year. But all of a sudden, that looks a lot different to me than it did a couple weeks ago. Really quickly, Cheesy Skull. Great question. Great user handle. He says, what do you think about Arkansas? So listen, you don't want to overreact to a win over Alabama A&M. The one thing I will say, and listen, if you listen to this show, you know I've been negative about Sam Pittman. I think it's not that I'm negative. It's just, one, that I'm realistic, and two, that the list of names that they could hypothetically get is interesting, headlined by John Gruden. But I'll say this, man. One thing that was very confusing to me was that I know they lost a lot in the portal and players leaving, Landon Jackson on defense, etc. But both, Pittman's a CEO head coach, right? And you bring back both coordinators, Talon Green in year 2 of the Bobby Petrino era, plus Travis Williams. I know the defense wasn't great on Saturday, but mostly just Talon Green in year 2 of the Bobby Petrino era. They get 52 points in the victory and get the win. Obviously, they're going to have to, continue that. And I'll say this, I do think it certainly gets much tougher starting. I don't know about this weekend against Arkansas State. By the way, if you can't beat Arkansas State with Butch Jones, remember Butch Jones is the head coach at Arkansas State, that's bad news. But certainly 2 weeks from now, you'll play at Ole Miss, then at Memphis, then that huge home game against Notre Dame. I get it. I get that the schedule is going to get tougher. But listen, I always say this. I'm never going to discredit somebody for destroying a team that they're supposed to destroy. And so Talon Green, Bobby Petrino, year 2, I think there could be fireworks. I just think the question with Arkansas, and it's the question everybody has. I'm not claiming that I'm reinventing the wheel here. The schedule is just so tough. Where do you get the wins? I mean, if they played an ACC schedule, they might be an 8-win team with Talon Green and Bobby Petrino calling plays. But look at the schedule. At Ole Miss, at Memphis, and then, of course, at Tennessee, at LSU, and at Texas. And then, oh, by the way, the home games, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Auburn. And by the way, Auburn looked really good. That's the only thing, is I'm not trying to be negative. It's just, it's so hard to find the wins on this schedule, and that's life in the SEC, man. You got to take care of business at home. Like that Auburn game, all of a sudden feels like a huge swing game where Auburn is not a pushover. But if you can win that game, can you get to 7-5? Maybe. The schedule is just so tough. Angry Dwarf says this. Don't put Arkansas down too fast. We looked better than we looked last year. TG looked great. Talon Green did look great. I don't know if I put down Arkansas. I'm just saying it's just hard to find wins on the schedule. I believe in Talon Green. I believe in Bobby Petrino. But yeah. All right, let's see here. Luke says, I can't imagine Arkansas not hiring Lashley or Malzahn if Pittman doesn't survive. So I did the joke on social media. I want to give myself credit. I was the first one. For people who do not know the history, Gus Malzahn, of course, is from Arkansas, former high school coach, was the former offensive coordinator a million years ago. But every single time there's a job opening, it's like, is Gus Malzahn the favorite? Is Gus Malzahn the favorite? Is Gus Malzahn the favorite? And so it was funny because I tweeted out during that Florida State game when Gus Malzahn's offense was running circles around Florida State. I said, is Gus Malzahn going to mess around and end up as the Arkansas head coach? Now, I'll say this. I was being part sarcastic, and I don't think in 2025 I would want Gus Malzahn as my head coach running an entire operation. But as a play caller, I would love him as my play caller. But by the way, that's kind of the situation that Arkansas is in right now, right? You have Bobby Petrino. Bobby Petrino doesn't want to be a head coach. He enjoys calling plays. He enjoys designing offenses. I don't think he wants the responsibility of figuring out NIL, dealing with a collective, dealing with a GM, dealing with agents. He just wants to draw up plays and put points on the board. So that's where it becomes interesting with Gus Malzahn. To Luke's point, I think obviously Rhett Lashley, who I joked is best known as the former UConn offensive coordinator. Yes, I'm being sarcastic. I know he played at Tennessee, or played at Arkansas, all of that. All right, really quickly, let's see if there's any other comments that we missed. Yeah, I think we pretty much hit on all of it. Gruden to Bama, says Paul. I'll tell you this, Gruden was I don't think he was half joking. I think he was dead serious about the opportunity to coach college football. Listen, I think there's a very good chance that if Gruden wants to coach in the SEC, somebody is going to hire him. I think it's pretty obvious, but at this point, I think it's safe to say the ship has probably sailed on him as an NFL head coach. You know how I know? Because he's currently suing the league, so that probably isn't going to work out very well for him. But I could see the scenario where Gruden is back in the SEC or is back coaching college football in the SEC. All right, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. Before we do, quick reminder. First of all, I want to thank our partners, Circa Sportsbook, Circa Casino. I've mentioned it a few times, but if you live on that Kentucky-Tennessee border, they have a replica sportsbook now at Mint Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Tennessee. Tennessee, Kentucky, listen, one, you need someplace to watch Notre Dame tonight. You don't work tomorrow, so enjoy it, get out. But two, whether you're watching college football or the NFL, remember, it's going to cost you $1,000 to watch all these games. YouTube TV, Direct TV, Sunday Ticket, Peacock, and Netflix, whatever. You know where you can watch all the games? Circa Sportsbook and Casino. If you're not in Vegas, that replica sportsbook in Franklin, Tennessee is the one you're going to want to check out. Also, mentioned this earlier, SeatGeek and SeatGeek.com. Use promo code Torres at SeatGeek. Get $20 off your first purchase. Paul was complaining because tickets to Auburn A&M, he wants to go to that game, are $400. Well, guess what? They're $380 when you use SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres. $20 off your first purchase. By the way, if you already have an account, just use a new email. Don't tell them that I told you that. New email, SeatGeek.com. Promo code Torres gets you $20 off. Support the show. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get out of here. Really genuinely appreciate everybody tuning in on a Sunday morning. For people who did not see the announcement to lead the show, we're going to go ahead and I think pretty much every Sunday going forward with the NFL starting up, we're going to do our Sunday show now first thing in the morning, 11 a.m. Eastern time. I host Fox Sports Radio till 2 a.m. Don't care. Going to get up, do the show. And by the way, we're going to start doing the show Tuesday and Thursday mornings as well. It just feels like with Thursday night football, with Monday night football, let's do the show in the afternoon. Let's knock it out. You can always catch it on demand if you don't catch it live. Going to get out of here. Appreciate everybody's support. Do me a favor. If you're not subscribed, do so. By the way, if you're watching on YouTube, that Fox Sports Radio podcast is pinned. Do your boy Torres a solid and go ahead and download that. Just give me a quick download. Really would appreciate your support because goes a long way. Let the Fox Sports bosses know that I crush it on YouTube, but I also crush it for them as well. Going to get out of here. Appreciate everybody's support. And we'll be back probably Tuesday morning following that Bill Belichick debut. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick, UF head. We'll be back Tuesday morning talking Belichick, talking maybe a little Notre Dame, Miami. New episode, Aaron Torres Pod. Appreciate everybody's support. Sunday mornings going forward.